we'd like to look at React Router for a React application. We've already talked about React the UI, the component library that allows us to build user interfaces, but now we need a way to navigate. So we need something outside of React to give the appearance of navigation, because we're working with a single page application. We're not actually navigating to multiple different pages. We have one single page, and we need to give the appearance that we are navigating, but the router will take care of that navigation routing and also hide and showing components based on the route, and basically giving the appearance of an application that's very interactive. So we need to go outside of React. We need to install React Router. One thing to know is there's two versions right now, version 5 and version 6. I'll show both. There's a lot of legacy code and a lot of examples out there that have version 5, but we'll show the migration path. Even in a little basic tutorial with some tags that are a little bit different. So anyhow, first of all, I ran this command npm install react router -dom. When you use npm, you can specify the version you'd like to install. If you don't know where to find that, you can go to npm and then search React Router, DOM. This is where all the packages are. And then you quickly look at all the different versionings, and you can see version 3.5.3.4 is still pretty much in use with 1.7 million downloads the last little while. Version 6 is the latest version up there. Is it's still rivaling it, right? So version 6, but very much version 5 is still around. So you have to be mindful of that. And I went ahead and I installed it. And you can see in my package.json that React Router DOM is installed. That has put all dependencies and node modules and all set up for us. And then I already ran npm run start. So I have my browser kicking off with the boilerplate React app. And now we want to add some navigation to it. So what can we do? If we look at the components, I have just a couple components. Pretty basic. There's an about that just has some JSX that shows about. We have the home component. We have a navigation that we'll fill in. And then in our source, we have our app.js, which is the entry point. And I haven't done anything yet with this. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to start to build this out a little bit so we can remove this boilerplate JSX. And what I'd like to do is just import in those components. So home, import the home component from, so hopefully our IntelliSense will now pick it up. Import home component from ./components/home. So we have that imported. We have our about component as well. About from ./components/about. In our parent tag, we could reference these two components via the JSX tag, so /home and then /about, and we can check our UI to see if it updated, and it did. So now we have two components that are side by side, and this is not what we want. So what we need to do is we would need to find a way to hide show them. We need a way to trigger them so that either the home or the about page is shown based on our request. We can't do this with React out of the box, so we need to install React Router, which we did, and it has basically the HTML5 history API is what is wrapped around this. So we're going to be leveraging the browser's history API. That's what the package does. And then we need to create routes to be able to help with navigation. So let's do that. So to do that, we need to go back to our example here, and we need to, we can get rid of some of these things we're not using, but most of all, what we need to do is import from React Router DOM. We're going to grab a few things. So we're going to grab the browser router, and we can alias it as just router. We are going to grab the route tag, and we're going to grab the switch tag, and we're going to grab all of that from React Router DOM. And let's just see what we're looking at. We need to make sure that This is capitalized. So there you can see here that router, route, and switch are coming from React Router DOM version 5. To do that, you wrap your application in router, and then you use the switch statement, just much like a JavaScript or C# or any programming language. A switch statement basically will match against the case. When it finds a case, it will run some executable or some type of logic. This is similar to the routing table for React Router. When we match a route, it'll show the corresponding component. And what I mean by route is we're gonna match the URL. So if we go to route, so now we're gonna define the route, and it gives us this little component called route, a part of the library, and the route has an attribute for path. And right now I'm just gonna say route slash. We are gonna give it component, and the component is going to be home, and you can look at that there. So you can, as you can see, when it's coming into the, so when the URL, we want to create a route for the about, so go ahead and go route path, and we'll give it a slash about, and then we're going to show that component. The component is going to be the about component. So we have two routes. We can test that quickly. Slash about. And now there's something here that, because we're using 5.3, we have a situation here where we have the slash. And what's going to happen in the switch table is, because in our URL we have slash and then slash about us, it's going to grab the first matching tag and show the home component. So there's actually two ways we can do it. I mean, we can create a home route, but I mean, we want to handle the default route. We don't want to have to create an index or a home route just to show them landing page. So they give you a nice little attribute called exact, so that home will only show when it's exactly slash. Otherwise, it'll go to the next case. And the way React Router works is it'll find the first matching case and then show that component. So now if I go about, you can already show the slash or just the default page will be home. So we have this working. Routing is working. It's showing, it's matching correctly the URL, and it's showing our component. Create a navigation bar. We need to be able to, navigate through. And for now, we're just going to import navigation. Import navigation from. All right, so we have this problem here. Imported navigation cannot be found, and what we're missing actually is we're missing the import statement. Sorry, the export by default, because that marks the component as private, and when you export it, it'll be now public. So that allows us to import it into the main app.js. So you can see there the compiler updated, and now we can see the component. So that's what we would expect. So we just need to go back now and make sure that everything is imported correctly with our JSX. You can see there that it's in the switch statement, and we may need to move that in a little bit, but we can maybe perhaps move that outside of the switch statement, which would be probably the better choice. Because what the router does, so I'm moving it right now outside of the router tag, and we'll see that although it doesn't throw an error, it'll actually, when we go to hook up the linking, it won't allow it to access the router, because what the router tag is like a provider. So it provides the whole application with access to React Router DOM. And we can see here that the routing is working, but there may be a little bit of an issue with React Router 5. So what we want to do here is we want to have some ability to call the router. Right now we just have just a tag, but that says navigation. But we need to import in the link tag from React Router. So what we'll do is we'll pull in React Router DOM, and then we want to pull out the link component. And what the link component does is it allows us to use that history API to do some pushing, and redirection. And what that's going to do is we need to just replace this text here and then build out our navigation links, much like we would. So we can see here we're going to have a link tag. And again, it's a component. It's like a React component. It has attributes, which are props. And the one prop is 2. So we're going to give it that root tag, and that's going to be the home. And then we'll create another one here, and we'll link it to the /about, and that'll be the about. And let's just refresh that, and we'll go back. All right, so we have a little bit of a runtime error. It says you should not use the link outside of the router. So we have to go back to the app.js. And like I said before, we need to pull that navigation tag. We need to pull that navigation component, that JSX tag, within the router tag, which is the provider. It's providing our whole application with access to the router DOM. So in order for the link to work, it needs to be inside of that router tag. So that'll actually fix this up. So we'll put that there above the switch statement, because remember, the navigation component isn't a route. It's not going to go in the switch statement. So we can see there it's being pulled in. We'll just add a little bit of spacing here, just to make it look. We're not using CSS, so we might as well just add a bit of spacing between the links. But so if we click here, there's actually an issue with this version of router 5.3. The routes will work. It's just there's a little bit of an issue with the history push. I believe if we uninstalled 5.3 and installed 5.1, I believe this will work. But what's happening is the router is working. It's just there's a little something with a little bit of the refresh that's happening. So we could downgrade it if we wanted to. But what we're actually going to do is we want to get used to the syntax and show the migration. Just to show version 6, because I know it's actually fixed in version 6. So what you'll see here is we're going to run npm to uninstall React Router DOM, and we're just going to run. So we're at 5.3.1. We're uninstalling all those packages, and then what we're going to do is we're going to run npm install React Router DOM, just the latest. It's going to be 6.22.2. So it looks like installed correctly. We're going to go back. Now, this is going to throw an error because there's breaking changes in the difference between the two versions. The migration path is not so bad in the example that we have. There's just a few little minor tweaks we need to make in order to make this work. And one is saying here the switch is not found in React Router DOM. And that's more of a legacy tag for version 3. And the compiler is giving us some information on that. So what we need to do is we need to go back to the app.js. We'll just look at the documentation here. It'll give you some info about upgrading and migration. And it says right there, you need to upgrade all switch elements to the new tag called routes. And that's really all you need to do is you need to replace the switch tag with routes and then just update the JSX. So that's one thing that's going to solve this problem. So we'll just quickly do that. So instead of switch, we'll pull in routes, plural, and then we'll update the switch statement with that. There's another thing as well that we need to do, but we'll just take a look at what this does. This will probably clear out one error at least. It'll probably reveal another error after this. Well, anyhow, it does actually run it, but it may not render the component. Let's try this out. So we have the two links there. We kind of changed the appearance of them a little bit. When I click home, it's not working. When I click about, the route is changing, but the component's not rendering. So that leads us to the next little migration piece we need to update. So really it's around this component. You see how the component is actually referencing the home component, but it's different in React Router 6 as they use element. And you can do inline JSX there, which is really nice. So now this is not going to work yet because there's another step we need to do, and we'll refer to the documentation here. You need to call the fragment. So you can see there that it's not just referencing the home by reference. You need to actually call the JSX fragment or the functional components tag. So we just need to wrap that in, and we need to just go to our example and just put the angle brackets around that just to add that fragment. But this leads to a really nice little feature here that we'll show in a little bit, in that you can do inline JSX fragment. It's super useful, meaning you don't need to really create a little component every time, unless there's like a small message you want to make. So let's go back. So now this routing's working now, and it solved the issue from React Router 5, which is great. And one thing is we don't need exact anymore, because that is actually by default in the router. Things are a little bit more tighter, I guess, in the routing table. So it's actually a nice update from 5 to 6. So here's the piece here I was going to talk about. The concept perhaps of a default route, meaning if all these other routes have not been met, we could then just give a default wildcard. So what we're saying here is if slash didn't match up, the slash about route did not match up, everything else will fall into that wildcard, and the wildcard is that asterisk. And what's really neat here is, we don't need to create a little component for a message anymore. We can just do some inline JSX there, which is super nice. So we're just going to put a header tag and just put not found. And we don't need to create a functional component for not found. We can just quickly do inline JSX, which is super useful and hasn't is missing from React Router 5. So you can see there the about. If we mess with the URL here, put some random, you'll see here that not found is rendered. Very convenient and much needed upgrade from version 5. So anyhow, there's a React Router. We have some kind of routing mechanism to show and hide our components. We talked about React Router 5. We talked about React Router 6 and that small migration path, changing the switch elements to routes, as well as changing the component to elements, and then as well as that, the inline JSX.